Okay, then I'm going to do a screen share here, my desktop. All right, open up our VS Code here. Let me get rid of some stuff I was playing with. Okay, all right, so when we left off, we had this register function that was able to create a new user, but we haven't yet written the logic to log in one. So I figured let's start off there. Let's create a new method in here. We'll call it login. Okay, rec and res. All right. Now let's take a quick peek at the code that they're giving us here for the login part. We'll come back to the Json Web Tokens in a few minutes, but I just wanted you guys to glance at this. And I'm not trying to trash the platform in any way, but does that seem very readable to you guys? Seems a little tough, right? In a second here. No, no's all around, right? Okay, so LOD. So in this case, I'm going to actually try to do something a little bit different so that we can make this thing a bit more readable, because I can't even process that looking at it. And this is sort of what we were talking about earlier on in this track about this thing called callback hell. So if you notice here, we've got this function here, and then inside it, we've got some other callbacks because we've got promises going on. We've got .thens going on. We've got all sorts of things happening here. So let's try to simplify this thing if we can, okay? I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to give this function a special designation, okay? We're going to say that this function is an asynchronous function. So I'll say async right here, okay? And what this allows me to do is that inside my function, it's going to allow me to wait for certain things to happen before I start trying to do something else. So in our case, if we kind of think about the steps that, in fact, let's sort of jot these steps out here. So the first thing that we're probably going to do is we're going to try to find user by email, okay? So if that fails, if we didn't find the user by email, then we know that we've got a bad login attempt, right? So if that works, the other thing that we want to do is we want to verify, or we'll say confirm password is a match, okay? And then if that works out, then we're probably going to somehow store some information about the user, right? Okay, so this is just like a rough framework for what we're trying to accomplish here. Okay, so let's start doing the first part. And I'm going to wrap our code a little bit here inside this thing called a try-catch block. Okay, so this may look a little funny for you guys, but we'll talk about it. Okay, so what I'm saying here is we're going to try some code inside this little block here, and if anything fails at any point along the way, we will end up inside of this catch block. It's going to basically push us down into the catch block, and that's where we can handle some errors. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to try to do is we're going to try to find this user, and we'll say const user equals the user model dot find one. Okay, and I'm trying to find the user by email, so I'm going to say here email, and what do you guys think I'm going to set that equal to? Any ideas? Props. Hey, we're in the back end here. We don't have any props. Ooh, rec.body.email. That looks good. Okay, cool. In fact, let's just destructure those guys up here. So we can say const email password equals rec.body, right? Now I don't even need to use this at all because the email is going to match this variable that's up here, right? Okay, but let's remind ourselves, what does this return right here? A promise. Boom. So normally we can't write code like this, right? Because if I say this is my user and then on the next line I try to console log that out, well, I would get that it was a pending promise, right? Because right now Mongoose is going to try to retrieve this user for me, but it's probably hasn't been resolved just yet. So let's make some small change to this, and let's say we want to wait for this to complete. Await. Okay? So by these two things, by me making this an async function like this, and by me saying await here, I'm able to write code as if it was synchronous. So now at this point, on the next line, I should actually have a user. So that should work right there. Assuming that I found a user. Now, if I did not find a user, I'm going to end up inside this catch block here. And we'll kind of see how to trigger that here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if no user, or we can make this more explicit. We could say if user equals null, that's what would be returned to us if Mongoose goes in and tries to find a user by that email and it's not there. It's going to give us back null. Then we can throw a new error. Okay, and we could just put whatever message we want in there. Please check your email and password. Anyone know why I'm saying that instead of just saying, please check your email? Because we know that it's an email failure right now, right?
You don't want the person logging in to know that the user email actually exists.
Exactly. Yeah. So let's kind of keep it vague and just say, that's not a match, essentially, right? Okay. So if I throw this error from inside there, it's actually going to push us down into this catch block right there. Okay. All right. Now, what's the next step that we need to check? So we said we wanted to find user by email. We've done that. Why are you using word new? Is that what you said? Okay. So what does that mean if we're using the word new? What does this tell you? Prativa, since you asked, I'm asking you.
Creating an object.
Correct. We are creating a new object of the error class, right? Exactly. Okay. And down here, we're going to end up catching that error if this gets thrown. But the reason why we have this catch-all is because we could have another kind of error. What's the other thing that could go wrong here? We haven't yet gotten to it, but the other thing that we need to do is we need to confirm that the password is a match, right? Okay. So for this, we're actually going to need to bring in our, excuse me, our Bcrypt, because Bcrypt is going to be used to match up whatever plain text password we're getting from the request against the hashed password in our database. So I'll say rec Bcrypt here, Bcrypt. Okay. Now we're going to use this same await keyword here, because normally if we go to the documentation here, so if you guys ever need to see the docs for the different libraries that you're using, you can usually start on npmjs.com and just look them up. So if I look up Bcrypt here, you can see that we've got the compare function right here. And that's what we're going to use. So we're going to say bcrypt compare. We're going to pass in the plain text password. And then we're going to also pass it the hash as well. Okay. The hash we're getting from where? Where's the hash coming from? The DB. Good. Nice. Not from the model, Prativa. Yeah. It's coming from the actual database. So right now, we've already pulled a user from the database right there, right? Okay. So I'm going to say await bcrypt.compare. Okay, and let's make sure what this returns here. See, you can see that it also optionally returns a promise here. So this is going to work with the await keyword. Now, if it only worked with a callback, then we would have to adjust our code to handle that. But it does optionally return a promise, so we're going to use it that way. So I'm going to pass in the plain text password, which we got from the request, right? The rec.body. Okay. And then as we said, we're going to take that hash password from the user that we just pulled. Password. Okay. Can anyone guess what's going to happen if these guys don't, if there's not a match there? Yeah, an error, exactly. So what's going to happen is an error is going to be thrown from this, from the bcrypt.compare function, and it's going to push us down into this catch block right here. Okay. So the reason why I wanted to do this as a try catch is that it's much more readable and easy to understand what's going on here, is that we're trying some code up here, and if we fail at any point in this, we want to just tell the user, hey, you're not legit. And I don't really know why, I just know that it's not a match in our database, right? Okay, so if that's the case, what do we want to do inside of our catch block? We probably want to say res.status. My status is going to be 400, right? It's like a bad request. They inserted, or they input a bad email and password. And then we'll just say JSON here. I'm just going to say, oops, message, please check your email and password. Okay, so no matter what the error is, I'm basically always just going to send back the same thing. And if we want to make this a little bit readable, more readable too, we can also do some chaining like this, where we're, okay, just to break things up a little bit. All right, so what do we want to do if they've successfully logged in? If we get past line 26, that means that no, yeah, what await is, sure. So Francis, what await does is it allows us to actually wait for this promise to be resolved or rejected before we move on to the next line in our code. But in order for us to be able to use that keyword, we have to designate this as an async function. We have to say that our function is going to be asynchronous in order for us to use await. And if you guys try to use await in a non-asynchronous function, you'll see that error crop up. It'll tell you you can't use await in a non-asynchronous function. Okay, cool. So what we want to do if this all worked out well, we can just say res. We'll do this for now, and then obviously later on we're going to want to save some information about the user, but I'll just say, we could just say status success, and then we could say something like user ID is going to be user._ID. Okay. All right, so that looks pretty good, at least for us to sort of get a skeleton of the login part. So let's get this let's get this connected in our routes. So I'll go back over to users.routes, and I'll say app.post API/users. We'll say login, right? Here I'm going to say users.ctl.login. And that should be wired up, because back in our server.js, you guys will remember earlier today, we already connected our user routes to our application. All right, so let's give this a try. Let's go to Postman. I'll set up a new post request here. So localhost users is spelled wrong. Really? What, on line 9, you mean? In routes? Oh, thank you. Sharp eye there. That would have been kind of a rude awakening, huh? Okay, 4000 API/users/login. Cool. And then, as I said, you guys can just type this in your headers if you don't want to keep doing that. So we'll say content type. Oh gosh, come on. And then we'll say that's application/JSON. Okay, so that's the same as just doing the me specifying a type of raw in application JSON. Okay, so in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass in email of the email that I inserted into the database, right? t.com. Let's say the password is bunk. We know that's wrong. And let's send this request. Success. Okay. Not gonna lie, guys, that wasn't supposed to happen. But that's all right. Let's take a quick peek at what's going on here. So if I come in here, users.controller, let's see what this actually gives us, right? So const result equals await that. Actually, I think this gives us a true or false. That's probably why that was happening. Console.log results. Okay, so I'll send it one more time. And then if I open up my console down here, it's my Mongo site here. Oh gosh. Sorry, I'm trying to, oh, there we go. Okay, so it gave us a false, right? It's telling us that the password was not a match. Okay, so we didn't get an error. Instead, we got a true or false. So let's do this. Let's say here, if result equals false, same thing, right? We want to throw a new error just like this. Well, if I'm putting the same string for both, I guess I could just set that as a variable somewhere up in here, right? const error message. Okay, and I'll just grab this here. Oh, where did my error go? Error message. Okay, same thing here, right? Throw new error message. And then I was using the same thing here, so let's just drop that in there. We don't want to tell the user what's wrong. And from a user perspective, I don't know about you guys, but I find that kind of frustrating sometimes when I try to log into an app and I'm positive that I have an account with that thing, right? And then it gives me some vague message like, oh, that's not a match. Well, I don't know if I'm, you know, maybe I registered with some different email accounts. It's kind of annoying, right? Yeah, sucky. All right, so let's save that. Let's try this again. Okay, so now we're getting what we want. We know that we submitted a bad password. We're getting, please check your email and password. All right, well, let's change the password. I think what I inserted was this, if I remember correctly. Boom. All right. Yeah, so that's working. So now we're sure that this person is who he or she claims to be. All right. But we're not quite finished yet. So we did this part and we did this part, but we haven't yet stored any information about the user, right? So in other words, if I were to make some other request right after this, well, we need to ensure that, that our server knows we are actually signed in still. So let's go take a look at what we're going to do next. This is where we're going to start talking about these things called Json Web Tokens. Okay. So to use JSON Web Tokens in our app, we need to install it, which actually we've already done. I installed that for us earlier today. And we're going to have to require it wherever we need it. So to make this thing run, we have to have what's called a secret key. Okay. Now they're showing you here that you can put your secret key right in your code. Does anyone see why that may be a problem or why you might not want to do that? Think GitHub or wherever you might be sharing your code, right? So I've got this thing out there, people can see my code and they can see my secret keys. Yeah, exactly. So we don't really want to do that. And one thing that, that I installed earlier today will allow us to avoid that. It's this package called .env. And so that allows us to establish some environment variables for our project. And basically, we will not commit our .env file, which is going to be where we're going to hold all of our environment variables. And that avoids this problem of having those keys, you know, directly in our code. Okay, so inside my project here, I'm going to create a file called .env. And then I'll just create a variable that I want. So let's say we'll call this secret key equals some really hard secret. Okay. And there's also there's an extension that you guys can install for VS Code if you want to use .env files. So that it'll give you kind of some nice syntax highlighting as well. And now in order to use that, we need to go inside of our server.js. And we're going to say up here, require the .env library. And then I'm going to invoke this function called config. Okay. So now, right after this, after I've invoked this config function, I should, in theory, have access to these environment variables that I put inside this .env file. So I'm just going to log this out and make sure that it's there. I'll say console.log. This is where we get our environment variables in Node. We need to get them inside the process.env, and then the name of that particular environment variable you're looking for. So here we're looking for .secret key. Okay, and I'll save that, and it's undefined. Awesome. So probably what that means is that it was looking for my .env file inside my actual server directory. So what I can do is I can change this path here and tell it where to find the .env file. So I'm going to say dir name, which is the current directory that I'm in. And then I want to concatenate onto that this. I want to go up one level and then my .env. So let's see if that works. Undefined, no. What did I do wrong? Oh, I think I need this, if I remember correctly. Okay, so now we're actually getting our secret inside there. Any questions about this before I move on? Sort of environments and secret keys and that sort of thing? Hackable. Okay, so what this is going to enable us to do is it will enable us to grab that secret key from any file that we need it in. So I'm going to need it when we're dealing with these Json Web Tokens. So let me get rid of that console log. Let's go back to the Json Web Tokens here. So this is, if we commit this to GitHub, should we still put the D? Yeah, you definitely want to do that. Absolutely. And then if you have somebody who needs to run the project, well, depending on what kind of secret keys you've got stored in there or whatever, you can maybe give them like an example.env file and say, these are the variables that you need to put in there, but not give them real values. And that file you could actually commit. You could commit like an example.env file. Okay, with fake information. All right, so this is how we're going to create one of these web tokens, is using the secret key. We're going to create an object that basically has all of the information that we want to store in the web token. And then we're just going to call this function sign. Okay, we'll pass in the object that we want, and then we'll pass in our secret key right there as well. Okay, so let's see how we can go about doing that inside of our code. So where is our controllers file? Okay, and let me close out the terminal as well. Come on, terminal, close. Boy, this is a pain. Okay, there we go. So what we want to do after this, since everything was okay when we got down here, what we want to do is we want to create this web token. This is where I need to bring in that library, right? So I'm going to say JWT equals required JSON Web Token. And I'm just going to create my token down here. So we'll say const token equals JWT dot sign. Okay. You guys can see the first thing is going to be either a string, an object, or a buffer. Don't worry about buffers, but we're just going to make it an object. So what do we want to store for our user? What do you guys think? I'll kind of leave this up to you. What would we like to put in the web token? Do we want to put their password or the password hash? Yes. Yeah. So think about it this way. We could put the username. Yeah, that'd be fine. Think about it this way. Your JSON Web Token is something where we're going to store information, but it's not necessarily secure in the sense that somebody else could potentially decode that web token and get out whatever values are inside of it. So if we were storing a password, that wouldn't be so good, right? So let's do this. Oops. What does sign do? So what sign is doing is it's actually creating the token for us. It's taking whatever data we pass into there along with our secret key and turning that into one of these JWTs. And we'll console log out what it actually looks like so we can see it. So I'm going to pass in an object here, and we'll have a couple things in there. We'll just say the ID is going to be the user._ID, and then the email is the user.email, right? Okay, so as we were saying, the second thing that we need to pass to the sign function is going to be our secret key. And where we have that available right now is going to be process.env.secret key. Okay, so for now, let's just log this out. We store nothing. I just saw this, Erica. That's kind of funny. Well, we need to store at least something, because if we store nothing, then it's like we really have no information about the user whatsoever. Okay. So it's sensitive in the sense that somebody could potentially see inside the token, but at the same time, we need to at least have something in there that identifies the user. Otherwise, we really don't know who our user is, right, on subsequent requests. So let's console log that out, token. Okay, let me move this over here. I'll open up my terminal again, and then let's send this request one more time. Same thing, you guys can see what this JSON Web Token looks like, and it has 3 different parts to it. This first part is actually the header of the token, so that basically has some meta information about the token itself. The second part after this first period is all of the actual token data, and that's been encoded, so you obviously can't just read that and understand what that means. It has to be decoded. And then the third part is the signature for the token, okay? So the signature is used to basically verify that this token is authentic. If that signature does not match what it should match, then we'll know that somebody tampered with the token and it's no good, okay? Is this something we actually need to know in terms of having to recall those items? No, it's not like this is going to show up on a test and we're going to say, hey, what are the different parts of a JSON Web Token? In real life, really, as long as you know how to use them, that's kind of the most important thing. You're not really going to have to write your own implementation of a JSON Web Token, so I wouldn't worry about that stuff. Yeah. All right, good. So, so here we are. We've got our token. That's nice. But how can we actually store it so that on subsequent requests, we know who this user is? So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to pass back, instead of the user ID, let's just send this back. Token. Okay. That's fine. I'll get rid of this console log here. All right. Anybody have any idea how we're going to store this information so that on subsequent requests we actually know who this user is? Because we have some information in the token. We have their ID and their email, right? Pictures. Yeah, cookies. All right, that's a good idea. Hutan, what did you mean by pictures? That's kind of an interesting thought. Can you clarify? Session. Hey, I said cookies was good. You didn't have to keep guessing. Taking pictures. Lol. What? All right. Yeah. Taking pictures. Okay. I'm. This joke is kind of eluding me. It's sort of funny, but I don't really. All right. That's funny though, Hutan. All right. What we're gonna do is we're gonna store it in the cookies. Okay. So over here, we can say something like res.cookie. Okay, and you can see here when we set a cookie, we can say, what is the name of this particular cookie? So we'll just call this one token. Okay. The value of it is going to be what? Sanity check, making sure you guys know what's going on. So what are we going to pass as the value for this cookie? Well, I said it's going to be called tokens, so what should the value probably be? The token itself, exactly. Thank you. Okay. And then in the third argument here, I can specify some options about this cookie. So I can say, here's one of the options that we are going to want to specify. We're going to want to say HTTP only. True. Does anybody have an idea of what that means? How about a user doesn't allow cookies? Yeah, pretty much. You know, and in that vein, that's kind of an interesting question. Can you imagine trying to use the internet with having cookies disabled? Right? That is a hugely problematic experience in terms of having anything consistent from request to request. You sign into something, well, how are they identifying that you are who you say you are? It's going to be pretty hard. Okay. So all right, so what HTTP only is saying is we're saying we don't want our JavaScript code to actually have access to the value of this cookie. Okay. The reason why is we generally want to err on the side of kind of not trusting things on the client side. Because if you think about it, what's happening on the client side is somewhat beyond our control. Not completely. I mean, there are a lot of things that we can do to improve security on the client side, but we don't have 100% control of what's going on over there. On the server side, we've got a lot more control, right? So by us saying HTTP only, we're saying we want to have access to this cookie on our server. We just don't want our client side to be playing around with it. Okay. All right. So that's us setting the cookie. And then there's one other little piece here that we're going to want to do. Here, let me click on that. Well, a couple other things that we need to do. We need to install another library, right? It's this thing called cookie parser. This is actually going to allow us to read the cookies on subsequent requests, because right now I'm storing the token in there, but I'm also going to need to be able to get it out at some point in the future. Okay, so let's install that real quick. Get out of this Mongo terminal. So I'll go into my server. npm I cookie parser. Okay, so that's the first thing we needed to do, and we need to say app.use and invoke the cookie parser function. Okay, came across an error earlier today where somebody was trying to use cores, and the cores function itself was not being invoked, so it wasn't working as expected. So watch out for that. When inside your app.use, make sure that you're actually invoking the cores function. And same thing goes here. We need to invoke the cookie parser function. Okay, so let's go back to our server.js. Up here, I'm going to require cookie parser. And then I need to use that as well. So I'll say app.use cookie parser. Oops. Okay. And then here, there was something else that changed here. So we're saying when we invoke the cores function, let's pass in an options object. So here we're saying we want there to be credentials, and we want to specify which origin we're accepting requests from. Okay, so in my case, I'm going to say credentials true. And I'm going to say the origin, oops, is HTTP localhost 4000. Okay. Okay, so the the main last piece of the puzzle here is that we want to be able to basically determine if somebody tries to hit a route that I'm trying to restrict. We want to send them back something saying, "Hey, you're not allowed to see this," right? Okay, so let's go to this authorization and middleware section. So here we're going to be requiring our Json Web Token, right? We're also going to be needing our secret key. And we're basically just going to create an authenticate function, which will determine whether or not the person is authorized to see something. Or actually, we're determining whether or not they're authenticated, right? Okay, so I'm going to close up some of these files for now. Okay, and inside my server, oops. Inside my server, where do we want to put this? They tell us they want, oh, they want us to put this inside the config folder. All right, that's fine. So inside config, we're going to create this file called jwt.config.js. Okay, and here again, I'm going to need Json Web Tokens. So I'm going to bring that in, jwt JSON Web Token. Okay, and then I'm going to create a function that to export. So we'll say module.exports.authenticate. Whoops, equals a function that takes in a request, a response, and a next. Anybody remember what next was earlier when we were talking about Mongoose? Because this is going to look kind of similar. Method. Yeah, so it's a function that we can call whenever we want whatever's next in the processing chain to run. Yeah, it was a function for Mongoose at that time. It was. In this case, this is going to be a function that Express is going to give us. Okay. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to try to verify this JWT. So again, I can drop that into a try catch block here. So let's say try catch. Okay, and what we're going to try to do is we're going to say JWT JWT.verify. Okay. Does anybody know what I'm going to pass that? This is where we need to pass the actual token. And where that's going to come from is going to be the cookies themselves. So I'm going to say rec.cookies. And the cookie that I'm looking for is the one called token, right? Who remembers where I'm going to get my secret key from? .w something. .w. I don't remember .w. No, I'm playing. It's going to come from the process. Whoops. Process.env. This is where our environment variables were. Secret key. Okay. So if this succeeds, what we want to do is we want to just call the next function. That means that everything was okay. If it fails, though, we actually want to return something back to the browser. So we'll say res dot status. The status that I'm going to send is 401. So this is indicating, hey, you're not authenticated. In other words, like I don't know who you are. And then we could just send some JSON with that if we want. We could say message unauthorized. Oh. Okay. Questions about this? No? All right. Okay, cool. So we've got this function here that we're exporting, but we haven't used it anywhere yet. So if I want to actually protect a route, I'm going to need to import this function to do so. So let's see, inside our cities controller, let's say that I didn't want somebody, or not inside the controller, sorry. Let's go inside the cities route. Let's say I didn't want somebody to be able to make a request to get all my cities unless they were actually authenticated. Let's try that out. So I'm going to do some destructuring here. So I'm going to take out this authenticate function that I'm going to get by requiring that file that I just created. So it'll be inside my config folder, jwt.config. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop that function in here. Like that. So let's think about what this does. When I make a GET request to API/cities, I'm then going to run this authenticate function, which will make sure, hey, yeah, that user is actually logged in. And then if everything goes according to plan, so if we look at that authenticate function, we should be running next right here, right? Otherwise, I should basically be ending the request response cycle right here and just saying, hey, you're unauthorized. Okay, so let's do a quick check of this. Let me go to make a get request. 4,000 cities. Okay, it's telling me I'm unauthorized. So let me see what happens if I log in instead. This was the correct password, right? Success, so that worked. Gave me back my token. Okay, so now it's working. So I basically was able to log in through Postman. Postman was storing the cookies just, in the same way that a browser would do, so that when I made the subsequent request to go get cities, it saw, yeah, I have a cookie in there that actually has the token inside of it. Okay. Okay, I've determined we're not going to do the front end this afternoon, but we could potentially do it. Maybe we'll do it tomorrow morning if you guys like. Does that sound good to you guys? Yeah. You can see like this is a very involved process, and that's kind of one of the reasons why, yeah, sounds fantastic. Nobody wants to see it right now. That's fine. All right, so let's just look through what we have. Is that the form interaction on the client side? Yeah, exactly. So we haven't done any of that, right? This has been all back end so far. Okay, but it is working the way that we expect it to, so that part's good. Let's just look through what we did and make sure that we have a good grasp of it. So if I go back into this users controller here, let's take a quick peek at this. This was the hard thing, this login function, right? Baxter, take me through the beginning part of this.
All right, we're creating our const, and we're pretty much setting our rec body to email and password.
It's kind of the other way around though, right? We are destructuring these guys from the rec.body.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not creating a new object. I'm creating a couple new variables here by extracting them from the rec.body.
Cool.
Okay, 19.
And we're just simply creating another const with the error message. Please check your email and password.
Yeah, so that's going to be our generic error message right there. Okay, cool. Then, let me see. Francis, take us through these lines.
I'm gonna try my best.
Yeah, that's fine. It's okay if you stumble.
Yeah. So I mean, for me, the try is still a little confusing. But hold on. Let me see my notes.
So yeah, when we're doing
Yeah.
try,
So
we're essentially saying, hey, let's give a shot to this code.
okay.
And if something goes wrong, we're going to have a catch block, which will be routed to in that case.
So it's basically like then and catch almost.
It's very much like an if else, if you think.
Oh,
about
okay.
it, right? Like if our code works, then cool. Else, we're going to end up in that little catch block.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess inside that try, we have the constant variable user.
Right.
And we assign a wait,
Mhm.
which is so that that one is like waiting for a promise to be
Correct. Yeah,
resolved.
so that we don't have to chain .then to it.
Mm-hmm. And then it takes user from, I want to say, from the models,
Yeah, this user with a capital is our user model, correct?
and then we invoke the find one function
Mhm.
that takes in the email,
Right.
and then in there we also have an if check that if the user is equal to null, then we just throw in an error message.
Right. Yeah, so that's us creating an error right here. We're saying there's an error because we didn't find a user.
Right.
Okay.
Do I go all the way down
You
to?
can just do line 29. That's fine.
Okay. And then we also have another constant variable called result, and that also we also assign a weight, and we also do the bcrypt.
Mhm.
Um,
Bcrypt is our library.
I'm sorry.
I was
Sorry,
just
you're
saying Bcrypt is the library that we installed.
right. And then we have the function compare,
Mhm.
which takes in the password and the user dot password.
Yeah. Yeah, so the password is just the plain text password that they've supplied us, probably through our form, if we do the front end. And then the second argument here is the password that we got back from our database, right? That's the hashed one. And the reason why
Sounds
we
good.
have to use this compare function is because we can't directly compare a plain text password to a hashed one. Obviously, those two things would not be equal, right? So that's where
Right.
the compare function comes into play.
I see. Okay.
Okay. Albert was asking what's different between this and promise. Okay, there actually is no difference. Anything that you can await must be returning a promise. You can only use await if the thing that you're waiting for returns a promise. So it still is one. And we could still do bcrypt.compare and then chain a .then to that if we wanted to. It's just, I was trying to make our code look more synchronous so that reasoning about it makes more sense. We can kind of go line by line still. Okay. All right, cool. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mark where we are in here so that we can pick this back up tomorrow, because I actually have to go to a meeting right now. But if you guys bump into any issues this afternoon still, I'll still be available through Mattermost. And when we pick this back up, like I said, I'll just make a note that kind of this is where we stopped actually talking about it. Okay. All right, I know that was a lot of information. More pop quiz. Yeah, quite possibly. Because we may want to review it a little bit once we get ready to do the front end part of it. Because there's really a lot to this login reg stuff. Yeah, no worries. Okay, cool. So let me stop the recording here. Yeah, it is complicated, I know.